And now I would like to invite you smoothly, with no break this time, to the next part of our conference. So it will be panel 1 in a form of roundtable debate. The topic is European Union, Managing Migration, Actors and Strategies. It will take 45 minutes. And it will be moderated by Professor Stefania Panebianco, with 3 panelists that I would like to invite here to join us. Ms. Maria Pamuła from United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Office in Poland, Ms. Eva Moncure from European Border and Coast Guard Agency, namely Frontex, and Mr. Sebastian Ryś from European Commission representation in Poland. So please, dear panelists, join us here, and we will launch the debate. Przynieś jeszcze z zewnątrz kilka czystych kartek, jeden długopis, żeby pani moderator mogła...
Here we are. Good morning again. I have the privilege to chair this round table, and it is a privilege because we are really entering into the real picture of what is done by institutions. But several institutions which are here represented. We have Maria Pamuła from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, representation in Poland. I would say the role of UNHCR is extremely important when dealing with the migration crisis, and I'm really looking forward to listen what she's going to say, considering and in order to talk about real strategies, real actors to manage migration. Then we have Eva Moncure from Frontex. She's coming from not very far from here. I was here yesterday at Frontex, and it's really around the corner. Not from Sicily, though. And again, we will have another perspective on what is going to be done, what can be done, and what should be done in order to manage migration. And then when we have Mr. Sebastian Ritzk from the European Commission representation in Poland again. I think that the European Commission is crucial, as always, when policy making starts in order to launch ideas and suggest proposals within the EU policy making, but this is what we have seen, for example, with the agenda for migration, but then it's up to the EU member states to decide whether and to what extent contents of the EU agenda of migration can be implemented and or adjusted. I would suggest that since this is a roundtable, you have 10 to 12 minutes for your speech, and you will talk in the order of the program, so that just we see if there is one or two questions from the audience in the end, in the final debate. Then please, Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I enjoyed also previous two conferences knowing what was the topic. I expect that today it will be the same day program full of brainstorming and ideas and something that we can all take from. I'm very honored to sit on this panel and to talk a little bit about the strategies and ideas for the managing migration from the perspective of the organization that actually deals mainly with refugees. So I will refrain myself to talking about the refugee aspect of the migration, so forced migration. I have just a couple of slides. I know that the topic is more focused on Europe, but I would like to present a little bit of the general background and a little bit of more data. I've seen some data regarding European Union already, but I would like to show you also a little bit how does it look globally and what are the numbers, just to have some perspective. Okay. We skip the part on the UNHCR itself. But just to say, when we look globally at the issue of refugees worldwide, the numbers are stroking, and from year to year we've been facing higher and higher numbers, people forced to flee their homes because of the war or persecution. This is the data for 2017. Unfortunately, the data for 2018 is coming within 3 months. It's usually the June World Refugee Day when we publish the data for the previous year, so I only have the data for 2017. However, you already can have some basic information, and I expect that the data for 2018 will be quite similar, with the top 10 refugee hosting countries and 31% of the refugees hosted in 3 countries. This is not EU, as you can see. There's Turkey, Pakistan, Uganda. Those are the countries that take the bulk of the worldwide refugees. But I wanted to also show you top 10 donors, because when you look at the countries, or not only countries, the donors that donate the majority of our budget, and the third place is European Union. Actually, it's one of our main contributors, and it's one of our main partners when it comes to dealing with migration, not only locally in the European Union but also worldwide. This is just to show you where the population of concern is. We had 67.7 million of displaced persons. It's not only refugees, it's also internally displaced persons, which is more than 36 million, meaning those who have the grounds to be granted refugee status, but they didn't leave the country due to some reasons. Then we have 17.2 million of actual refugees and 3.2 million of stateless persons who are also under the mandate of UNHCR. As you can see, the majority, biggest circles, you can see the Middle East, Africa region. This is also where our main operations are concentrated. When it comes to top 10 countries of origin, since already some time, number 1 is Syrian Arab Republic with 6.3. Then we have Afghanistan and South Sudan, and those 3 made more than half of the refugees worldwide, which is quite a number. Then we have as I already mentioned, Turkey, Pakistan, and Uganda hosting the majority of hosting 1/3 of those refugees worldwide. When it comes to the European Union, this is the situation from the perspective of UNHCR, but I'm always promoting this portal because it's updated daily. So if you need the data for any kind of your research or studies, or just to want to check the latest, this is actually, I put it very late because this morning I was making the presentation, but I just copied the data, so it's actually from yesterday because it's always from the day before. And we can see that the total arrivals through Mediterranean is much, much, much lower than in 2015 or in the previous years. It's a little bit more than 10,000 persons who arrive through the Mediterranean route. Of course, there are other routes to come to Europe, and of course there are also other data, but this one is like the most updated one and quite efficient. And if you go down the screen, which I cannot do now because it's just a print screen, you have a number of research and reports describing the population that actually reaches Europe. So I encourage you to have a look. And going very locally, just a little bit of data for Poland, as you can see, and it also corresponds to the numbers that were presented when it comes to the perceptions and the reality. As we can see that the people in Poland believing that more than 10% of the population is migrants, whereas it's 1.1. When it comes to refugees, it's even lower. The numbers are below the statistical mistake, so they do not appear in the statistics actually. Last year we had a little bit more than 4,000 applications for international protection in Poland. Out of that, only 360 persons were granted international protection. Those are round-up numbers. More than 2,000 negative decisions, and persons who left during the asylum procedure, meaning that probably they left to other EU countries also, it's 1,900. So you can see also dropout rate, which also indicates some trends being present in Poland for a longer time already when people apply for asylum in our country and move forward to other European Union states. So this is when it comes to the background and also the little bit map of where the asylum applicants in Poland live. And this is from my side as a kind of an introduction to the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we pass the floor to Ms. Valencourt from Frontex. Then do you have a presentation? No.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think I've been to all conferences that Marta organized, and it's always a pleasure to be here. I represent the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, which has its seat in Warsaw, otherwise known as Frontex. The agency was created very quietly in 2005. It came to Warsaw and grew steadily with 300 employees till about 2011. And then things started changing very rapidly because it became very, very clear that the agency, which has as its role support of the European member states at its external borders in case of a migratory crisis, and we have been doing that our role is to grow because the situation at the external borders of the European Union was changing rapidly. So the first big change was in 2011 with the Arab Spring, when we had a taste what it means when very large number of people, mostly across the Mediterranean, begin to arrive in Europe and everything that it brings. And of course then, fast forward to 2015, we already talked about the situation in 2015, where it was a very crucial year for Europe, and it was a very crucial year for the agency, for the European agency, because it again became very, very clear that with large numbers of migrants arriving, migrants and refugees, because half of the migrants who arrived in Europe were clear refugees, half of them were Syrian, a mechanism and a much stronger agency is needed to handle this situation. And Frontex, with 300 or 400 employees at the time, and about 300, 400 people deployed at the external borders. Those deployed come from the member states. They are border guards, or police officers that come from the member states. That was simply not enough. So in 2015, in the spring of 2015, following several very tragic incidents in the central Mediterranean that resulted in the drowning of hundreds of people, the European Council decided that Frontex needs to strengthen its operation. And I have to say, we forgot that, but in that one meeting, it was decided that the number of vessels Frontex had deployed in Italy and in Greece, because these were the two migratory routes where most migrants were coming, had to be tripled. And it happened, and it did happen in the next days. So this is how Frontex presence in 2015 went from having 5 vessels in Italy to 15 vessels, and from having 7 in Greece to having 20-something in Greece. So it was a very quick response, and there wasn't much of a discussion what needs to be done, because it was very clear to everybody that this help is needed, and this response was there. So we grew. We grew, and in 2015, we had about 400 border guards in our operations. By the end of the year, we had 2,000 people deployed in our operations, most of them in Greece, but also in Italy. And it stayed that way. And I would like to stress, and my predecessors have talked about it, we do not have a migration crisis in Europe at the moment. The numbers of arrivals have dropped significantly and they correspond to the numbers. I mean, in 2018 we have seen about 48,000 people arriving at the external border. So these are the numbers we were seeing 4 or 5 years ago. But the situation, the migratory situation, and the question of effective management of the external borders has not been solved. So there is still a need to keep our operations running in support of the member states, which are on the main routes. We've talked about the main routes. The main routes to Europe still are the same. There are 3 main ones. They are all across the Mediterranean. The Western Mediterranean route, mostly used. This was the top route entry point to Europe last year. The Central Mediterranean route, where we have noticed the most significant drop in the number of arrivals, and the Eastern Mediterranean route, which is Greece, where the numbers have been sort of steady for the past 2 years. What happened and what is happening and what is Frontex doing? In 2016, it was clear that in 2015, by the end of 2015, with 1 million migrants coming, it became very, very clear that we can lose Schengen. Clearly speaking, we were very proud. It was a great achievement. It was always mentioned next to Erasmus, which is also a great European success, that Schengen, we got so used to, we have it, it's so easy, it's great. In 2015, with the massive movement of migrants across the Western Balkan, it became very clear that member states in this situation are reintroducing border controls at the internal borders, And if this trend continues, Schengen is in danger. So it was clear that for that not to happen or not to happen any further, the control of the external borders needs to be strengthened. So the member states were, of course, doing what they could, but they needed more European help, more help from Frontex. So in 2016, we got a new regulation. Which basically extended our powers and made it our operations were defined more broadly, and we became a truly European border, and we became a very important part of European border and Coast Guard, meaning a European body made up of European members and authorities in the member states responsible for border control and the agency. So we became this one body responsible for the security of the external borders of the European Union. I have probably 5 minutes left, so I will not go into great detail, but there were several elements of this regulation which are very important. First, one of new tasks of the agency became conducting what is called a vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability assessment of the member states is sort of like a health check of the capacity of the member states to manage their borders. And this was introduced so in order for us to be better prepared for any type of situation at the external borders, not limited to a migratory pressure. For the past 2 years, we've been conducting vulnerability assessment, and we've been providing individual member states with the results of this assessment. And what we look at is not only the number of border guards and the type and numbers of the technical equipment that they have at their disposal, but also at the type of training, at the different scenarios that, if implemented, are they able to handle them, and so on. So it's a rather comprehensive exercise. So this was introduced. And then the second biggest change was the change concerning security. Because 2015, we all remember, was not only the year of migratory crisis, was also the year where we, in the EU, we experienced very, very serious terrorist attacks. And there was a fear that although the great majority of migrants have nothing to do with terrorism, that if we are not able to control our external borders, foreign fighters might be either coming back to Europe or entering Europe to carry out their work inside the EU. So we have immediately reacted by deploying more experts to the borders. For example, in every operation where we are present, and we are present in Spain, in Greece, and in Italy, we have document experts. We have people who are looking at documents. We have also people trained to look for people who might have links to any type of crime, including terrorism. So this is not just limited to terrorism, but also any type of organized trans-border crime, and passing on this information to the competent authorities, to the police for criminal investigation. So the role of the agency is sort of from the pure support role to the member states' authorities at the external border, providing extra vessels, extra border guards, sort of move more into the security area to making sure that we can keep Schengen, because we are actually capable and able to control effectively the external border of the European Union wherever it's needed. Things have not stopped there, and as we speak, the new version of the European Border and Coast Guard Agency regulation is being discussed. It's being discussed between the Parliament and the European Council, and probably at some point this year, the final version will be negotiated and it will enter into force. It pretty much builds on the previous regulation from 2016, but there's one fundamental new element and a very big change. It introduces the standing corps of European border guards. So this will be the first time when the regulation actually comes into force, when Frontex will have at its disposal border guards. And these border guards, there are different ways of how this might be organized, and how this is the recruitment and the buildup of this border guard corps is going to be developed over time, because of course you cannot do this. But this is a very big change, because from right now, although we have about 1,500, 600 people at the border, if you go to Greece, you will see that all border guards come from the national authorities. So there will be Straż Graniczna, there's Portuguese Maritime Police, there's Croatian Coast Guard, and so on. And all these border guards and all this equipment is coming from the member states for the time that they can actually let them participate in our operation, and then they go back and others come in. So as you can see, it's great that we can do it, and some can stay longer, some can stay for a shorter period of time, but this is not the most efficient way of dealing with border management, a constant turnover, a constant change of people and equipment. So the idea is to have a core. I don't know how big it's going to be. I think the final goal is to have 10,000 border guards at the disposal of the agency in several years, but to be able to deploy these border guards when they are needed. And I would like to come back to what I said at the very beginning, that we do not have a migration crisis. And it's true, and we did not have a migration crisis last year, and this year, I think the number of people who cross the external borders is at the level of 13,000, 14,000 at the moment. So it's not dramatic, which does not mean that there is no, it's done, we are great, and there is no migration problem, just the opposite. So just going back quickly to the vulnerability assessment, we have determined in the vulnerability assessment that basically, looking at all the data from the member states, we know that we are pretty much missing on the European level about 5,000 border guards. So if we add everything that needs to be done and compare it with how many border guards we have at the disposal, member states have at their disposal, we are missing 5,000 people. So that's just, if you're thinking what these border guards might be doing, there will be plenty of work for them to do. Another thing is that they're in Europe, to enhance security of our external borders, two systems are going to be introduced. One, entry and exit system, which will be introduced. I think the plan is to introduce it in next year, which is basically registration of everybody who enters and exits the EU, and it's going to be an EU system, not a national system. That's the problem, because a lot of countries have a system, entry and exit system, but if you come to Poland and leave through Portugal, you know, there's no way of checking your status. And another system, which is going to be introduced in a couple of years, it's called ETIAS, and basically it's going to be a registration system for all nationals of all countries that are not required to have a Schengen visa. So we are talking about 60 countries, from United States to New Zealand and Australia, Japan, Korea, Ukraine, Georgia. They will be required to register before they travel to the European Union for the purpose, and their information will be run through different databases And if there is no flag, there is no alert for this person, of course, in 95 or 98 or 99% of cases, that will be the case. They will be issued a travel authorization valid for several years. And the central, so that obviously are new things that are going to be introduced, are going to require people and effort on part of border authorities. And the central unit of the ETIAS system, European Travel Information System, will be in Frontex. I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. My name is Sebastian Rysz. I work here in the European Commission representation in Poland, in Warsaw. And before I will move to my intervention, I would like to join the choir of all those thanking the organizer of this event, the Warsaw School of Economics, for hosting us here today. This is a great honor to grant our honorary patronage to this event. And it's really not the best thing to hear today that this is the last conference of this cycle, but I'm quite sure that it will be replaced by some other event of equal value. If I would want to sum up where we are today in 2018 after these several years of migratory crisis, we would have to make comparisons to 2015, when Europe was hit by the greatest migratory crisis since the Second World War, as it was said here in the opening speeches. By the end of 2018, we had more or less 150,000 new illegal crossings to the EU. When compared with figures from 2015, the difference is staggering. So this is true that the situation is stabilized, and we hope that it will remain as that. When it comes to asylum, the number of applications is also asylum applications lodged by applicants in the European Union member states and Schengen area associated countries is also getting back to the crisis levels. By the end of 2018, it was more or less 634,000 applications. Of course, we have there in the south the main theater, which is the Mediterranean Sea, which we divide in three sectors: Western, Central, and Eastern. And currently, it seems that the most problematic part of that theater is the western part, where we have a problematic increase in illegal crossings to Spain, mainly from Morocco. In 2018, we had approximately 65,000 new arrivals, illegal migrants coming from Africa to Spain, mainly from Morocco. Majority of those new arrivals are indeed Moroccans. Therefore, it is sensible, and this is the European Commission's position, to establish deepened cooperation with that country, which is already happening. By the end of 2018, a sum of approximately 140 million euros was released for various cooperation programs with Morocco. When it comes to the central part of the Mediterranean, the most pressing issue there is related to Libya and the fact that illegal migrants are being detained in Libya very often in very appalling conditions. There is currently 6,000 people detained in Libya. So far, thanks to our cooperation with the African Union and with the UNHCR, we were able to release 37,000 people and additionally 2,500 migrants evacuated from Libya to their origin countries. The part of the Mediterranean which was the most problematic in 2015 and in the following year, the eastern part of that sea and the Greek Turkish border and Aegean. The problem there now is rather of administrative and legislative nature. The Commission perceives the situation there through the perspective of the lack of systemic and efficient immigration strategy being placed there by the Greek authorities. So we encourage Greek government to formulate such a strategy, adopt it and implement it. In general, all this action is related to emergency crisis stemming still from 2015 and from the influx of migrants to Europe. Nevertheless, the most important thing is to address the root causes of migration. And here we have several initiatives which might turn out to be crucial to at least ease those reasons for moving from Africa to Europe. We have EU's Emergency Trust Fund for Africa, which is supporting basic needs of more than 5 million people in the region. And the most important, we have in place already launched the External Investment Plan, which is a sort of initiative which had already been implemented here in Europe, the so-called Juncker Investment Plan. We believe that the real game changer will be boosting growth in Africa. The final goal of this investment vehicle is to mobilize investments of value of approximately 44 billion euros. So far, thanks to the guarantees that Leverage managed to initiate investments of at least 17 billion euros value. The asylum and migration portfolio right now is extremely vast. It covers a myriad of different initiatives, cooperation programs and projects with external partners, legislative initiatives here in the European Union. But I believe that the most important thing to keep in mind when we are discussing the European Union's role in the crisis is to remember that in the end the European Union is an entity which has its shareholders, and these shareholders are the European Union member states. And to make the European Union and its action regarding the migratory crisis effective, we need to have compromise over several legislative proposals that the European Commission presented so far. It is important to keep in mind that the European Commission is this part of that institutional architecture which proposes initiatives. But in the end, whether they are being adopted, whether they are being implemented, is contingent on the compromise reached with the Council, thus the representatives of the national governments and the European Parliament. Now we have several pieces of legislation which are pending approval from those two bodies. These are the proposal to further strengthen the Frontex, which Eva covered before a few minutes. We have a general reform of the common European asylum system, which still awaits for a compromise from the Council and from the Parliament. We have other pieces of legislation like the revision of new return directive, revision of the blue card directive, and it will not happen without the consent of the European Union member states. So there is one thing which is the emergency action, and the European Commission proposed and implemented and is coordinating a lot of initiatives covered by that chapter of action, and there is a legislative work which is need to be done in concert of all the European Union institutions. I will perhaps stop here because we might want to have something to discuss in the second part of this panel. One last word. The Commission is not shy when it comes to offer the public information materials. At the beginning of the month, on the 6th of March, there was a new progress report on the implementation of the European Agenda on Migration published, made available to the public. This is this document. I was going through it, and it's all covered with my notes. So this is really a gold mine of information on the progress made so far and specific initiatives. So I would recommend you to find it out. It is available at the web pages of DG Home, which is a specialized department of the European Commission dealing with home affairs and migration and asylum affairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that we have a few minutes, a couple of minutes before the coffee break. Then if you want to take the floor, we have micros and we can address the speakers. Do you mind taking us? May I ask you to identify yourself for raising the question? And these should be questions, not long statements.
Sure. Yeah, just to show that we can register your voice.
Good afternoon, everybody and our distinguished speakers. My name is Katerina Krakhmalova. I'm a lawyer and also academic lecturer from Ukraine, currently doing research in Poland. My question would be probably very simple, but it really bothers me because this question and basically this issue was raised by Professor Ponivienko's presentation, and then also it was repeated by a presentation of Ms. Pamula. So in essence, when we see statistics and this sharp rise in number of people of migrants arriving in 2015, then actually what struck me as odd is that the number of people dead and missing actually rises in year 2016 when, as I assumed, or my perception was that there were already some policies in place. So what was the causes for this disproportion? Why actually number of people coming is smaller, but then actually these casualties and deaths are actually in bigger numbers. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I am Abdou Zegravi, migration researcher from Paris. My question is for Eva Moncure from Frontex. Do you think that the outsourcing of migration management to South Mediterranean countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, or Egypt, giving them a lot of money, is a real solution, at long term, And don't you think that giving these countries a lot of money, we give them means to blackmail? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marta Górczyńska. I'm a human rights lawyer from Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights in Warsaw. Actually, my question would be similar to one that was already asked. So I wanted to ask the European Commission about the fact that if European Commission is taking the efforts to release people from the detention in Libya, why not stop sending them there according to the position of UNHCR and NGOs in Europe? This is not the safe country for these people to be sent there, according to the reports, testimonies, the conditions in the detention centers there are appalling, and we know that it's not safe for them there. So the question is, why not stop sending them there? Thank you.
Janusz Belicki from Kardynał Stefan Wyszyński University. I have a question to Professor Stefania. Pane Bianco, you show us the slides with this possibility that the European Union would be damaged by this migration crisis. But how it would be, in your opinion, if this European Parliament election would get a lot of people who didn't show the solidarity in this crisis in 2015? What would happen in the future with the European Union?
I appreciate, of course, the questions which are addressed to me, but I think also that we have distinguished speakers. I will answer, don't worry. But I think that we have distinguished speakers that probably can be inspiring and provide useful information for the entire group and the conference. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the great roundtable discussion or the presentations. My name is Martina Vitrovcová. I'm a PhD candidate in political science at Heidelberg University in Germany. And I have a question for Ms. Moncure. You mentioned that the idea in the future is to have a certain number of, or a fixed number of border guards. And I was just wondering, because what we've heard before is also that migration flows, of course, differ in the future. So how are you going to make sure that this system is not only fixed but also flexible, so that we can react to increased migration flows, but also when there is no migration, as we've experienced the differences, that we don't actually have to use all of those fixed guards? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Andrea De Petris from University of Benevento in Italy. I have a short questions for the Frontex and the European Commission representatives here. What's the situation with the Sophia mission, which is supposed to end at the end of March, and it raised a lot of controversial comments from some national governments, as the Italian one, also because the goal of the mission was not that clear, actually quite unclear. On one side, it was supposed to control the external borders of Mediterranean. On the other side was actually preparing the Libyan Coast Guard in order to make their own part of the control. And actually we know that this kind of board guard is not exactly sort of preventing only the control of the border of the Mediterranean, is actually also interacting, let's say, with some militias in Libya, which is part of the problem. So what's, from your point of view, the future of this mission for the next future? Thanks.
Yeah, why not indeed? Well, I didn't plan to, but okay. Jan Truszczyński, Vistula University. A question to all dear panelists. Perhaps we seem to be having a total stalemate, political stalemate in the Council regarding some of the pieces of the Commission package of 2016. I'm referring here specifically to Dublin IV and to the legislation on the European Asylum Office. This doesn't augur well for the Union's ability to find common language for all EU 27 member states. How do you see the political future, frankly? Do you see a potential to move towards configurations of the states which are willing to move forward, leaving the others behind? Do you see the inevitability of having to deal on an ad hoc basis each time there is a ship full of would-be refugees in the Mediterranean, dealing with that on a case-by-case basis, something that we have been seeing during the past few months, for instance? How do you see the ability of the member states to find common language regarding the trickiest aspects of EU migration policy, EU asylum policy?
Thank you to all the questions. I think that we should start from the reversed order so that we can either say one last comment or answer the questions which were expressly addressed to you. Then please, can you start, Sebastian?
Okay. So I will maybe perhaps try to merge all these questions because they are all oscillate over in reality over the same set of issues. Of course, it would be ideal to not send back migrants to Libya. That would be the perfect situation. Nevertheless, regardless the efforts made by the EU so far with its partners, with the African Union and with the UN to release those who are in detention, the national borders must be respected. And I could smoothly transit to the question of Mr. Vekis about Operation Sofia. As we know, its mandate lasts till the end of March, and indeed there are a lot of controversies generated in some member states over this initiative, over this operation. And we could now clash the question number one and question number two. What happened if some actions taken within the Operation Sofia, or in general actions taken by the EU on the sea, would not lead to sending migrants to the country they are coming to Europe, to Libya or to any other country? We would have even more controversies over this or that initiative and bringing migrants to Europe. Of course, no one in the European Commission intends to bring hundreds of thousands or millions of migrants to Europe, as on occasion in certain countries we were accused of. There is no such intent. The intent behind the European agenda on migration is to set up a clear and effective system which will be helpful in dealing with crises like the one that occurred in 2015. But as I said earlier, to achieve that, to build that system, we need to reach a compromise. That compromise must be reached mainly between the Parliament and the European and the Council of Ministers. And this is also partly an answer to the question asked by Jan Truszczyński, who is not only the representative of Vistula University in Warsaw, but also veteran of the European Commission and former Director General for Education and Culture in the Commission, who knows the decision-making process of the European Union far better than I know, and I would ever think that I might know in the future. So. It is all depend on the European Union member states, and I don't have really a freedom of political decision maker to go into territory of speculations what will be the future and how it should be shaped. In general, the position of the Commission is that the decision on the compromise on all these pending pieces of legislation should be made as soon as possible till the end of the term of this European Parliament. And as we all know, we have the European elections in 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Starting with a question about deaths and missing numbers. That's actually a really interesting question. Thank you very much for that. And I don't think there is a straightforward answer, but I think that's a combination of different factors. Looking back to, among others, EU-Turkey deal that blocked a number of that blocked the one route, the migration route, which was the shortest and the simplest, making people shifting to other directions and trying to cross in another points of Mediterranean Sea, which are not necessarily the safest one. I would say there would be also the influence of the general fighting smugglers policy and then trying to block the routes to the Mediterranean, to the southern shores of Europe. And we've been observing for already some time the actions taken in scope of the private rescuers, the NGOs or private persons that were renting boats and trying to help people drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. We've seen that now some of those persons are being brought to courts in their home countries for the actions taken in the Mediterranean Sea. So that also discourages the followers to do the same, and there is a less and less persons involved in that kind of actions. And thirdly, I would say that we also have reports of the pushbacks from the territorial waters, where some border guards of some countries trying to push the ships, including flooding the engines and putting people in danger just to make them move to another territorial water of another country. So to get rid of the problem being blunt. So I think there is a number of issues, and the situation in the Mediterranean is getting more and more difficult. Therefore, we also need some strategic solutions. And getting to the question about the political future of European Union migrations, yes, wow, that's a question. Looking at our involvement in the UNHCR in the discussions, or observing the discussions on CIAS and the reforms that are going on, we see that there is no easy solution for that, that with a number of issues that different states find the core stones that they don't want to move from one place to another. And saying that, I would say that the solidarity, although the word solidarity has been used in so many contexts and overused sometimes, but I still think that the solidarity is the only way to move forward. And we've been discussing with the European Union, with issued last year a very nice document addressing forced displacement effectively, asking European Union to take steps not only to respond to the asylum issues within, or migratory issues within the European Union, but to continue the support outside. We have a number of initiatives taking place in Eastern Europe or this Northern Africa, including support for the asylum system, support for the hosting countries, is one of the key, as I mentioned already, key funders of our operations. Also, it's all interconnected. It's not, we are not living. Europe is not, living in a vacuum. So movements that actually ends up in Europe start somewhere, and we need to find the ways to address them properly and to find solutions. So I hope this year we have the pledging conference in realization of the Global Compact for Refugees, and we see that the pledges that are coming from different countries saying that they would like to be more engaged in this and this particular things. So I'm a little bit optimistic looking at what's going on when it comes to the declaration of the states. But not too optimistic at that point of time, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start with the first question about the death in the Mediterranean, just to building up on what Maria was saying. Coming from an operational agency, I have the privilege to actually work closely with those on the vessels. And see operational reports. So I do agree. The reasons for the death toll rising in 2016 are complex and many. There isn't one that you can put your finger on. But I would like to say one word here, which was not mentioned here, which is people smugglers. The migrants, the hundreds of thousands of migrants who came to Europe and are coming to Europe, are paying people smugglers, criminals, and criminal organizations to come to Europe, and this is not small money. The current going price in Greece, I was in Greece last week, is about 600 euros for a place in a rubber boat with another 40 migrants, for example. This is what Afghans are paying today. The price fluctuates depending on the boat, depending on the demand, depending on the ability of migrant to pay. We don't have time to go into details. But the situation you are describing in Libya was the smuggling networks in Libya were operating without any disturbances from law enforcement, because Libya was at such a stage that basically they could do whatever they wanted, and the business of people smuggling was flourishing. What was happening through a combination of factors was that we have statistics that show that, for example, in 2014 or 2015, we would have a rubber boat, a 10-meter or 8-meter rubber boat with 70 people on it, which is outrageous. I mean, think about a 10-meter boat with 70 people on it, but you can still imagine. By 2016, this boat had up to 180 people on it, the same boat. There was no water, nobody was wearing a life vest. And even if the boat was rescued, we were finding dead people in the boat because they were trampled or they died from burns from gasoline or mixed with salt water. So, and the, you know, I don't want to get into a discussion if rescue ships, vessels of different sorts coming closer and closer to the Libyan coast. I mean, of course, that was taken into consideration by smugglers. We can have a philosophical discussion on what it does, pull and push factors. We don't have time for this. But this is what we have seen with our very eyes. We have seen twice as many people per dinghy. And that certainly contribute to that. I would like to come to the question about outsourcing of border control to the Northern African states. I represent Frontex. Frontex does not support the authorities in the North African states. We do not run operations outside of Europe. We probably will very soon have some operational activities in the Western Balkans because our new regulation allows it. But we don't even have working arrangements with none of the North African countries. So if there's, I think I would ask, maybe give the voice to the European Commission about that because Frontex does not work with the North African countries directly. We do run some capacity building projects in several African countries. Our only liaison officer in Africa is in Niger. We do have, and Niger is an obvious, it's a very important country because it's a key, it used to be even more key country of transit for African migrants going to Libya. So obviously Niger, Agadez, very, very important places. But we do not work directly with North African countries. We work with our European partners in the EU. Going back to your question, what are these border guards going to do with the numbers going down? So there's plenty to do. I mentioned all the new tasks the European border guards are going to have just because the new systems are going to be introduced, like entry-exit system. That means people need to be trained. People are going to be doing new things, and then we're going to add ETIAS on top of it. So, but from operational point of view, we not only have in Frontex operations, we not only have vessels or border guards, patrol cars or helicopters, but a lot of our experts are sent to Greece, Italy, or Spain to help with the registration of migrants, because if we want to have effective border management, you need to register everybody who's coming in. So if a person has a document, sure, you need a document expert looking at it, but if they have nothing, you need an interviewer who is going to be interview this person, an interpreter to help the interviewer talk to this person, and then that's how you establish the nationality. So you need trained people. But in addition to that, we also have experts that are very important. They're called debriefers, and these are the experts who actually conduct interviews with migrants willing to talk to them, because these are voluntary, about smuggling, about the routes, about safe houses, where are they, whom they talk to. And all this information, you can imagine, is absolutely crucial if we are to fight the phenomenon of people smuggling. But we are not able to conduct a lot of those. So only 5% of migrants who cross the borders actually are interviewed. I mean, if we are to understand the phenomenon, if we actually to understand and take advantage of all the knowledge that migrants bring with them and sort of, use it in our policies, in our approach to migration, we need to know a lot more. So rest assured, if we have more border guards, they will have plenty to do. There was one question I wanted to clarify. Frontex is not running Operation Sophia. Operation Sophia is it's a CSDP mission. So anything else I left out?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe if I may. Just a couple of words before we end this panel. One of the ways of avoiding increase in illegal crossings to the EU is to create legal pathways for those who would like to come to Europe. Part of that problem was in 2015 relocation resettlement schemes. As we know, the first, or at least I can assume that we know what was the purpose and the sense of establishing relocation. Relocation was an activity aimed at easing pressure, migratory pressure on two specific European Union member states, Greece and Italy. And that was the only and sole purpose of that exercise, to help other European Union member states to demonstrate solidarity. And that was the only reason that the relocation was established. As we know, not every member state decided to participate, sadly. Nevertheless, the relocation in that form that was proposed by the European Commission is practically completed. We managed to relocate from Italy and Greece 35,000 people to other European member states which were ready to accept them. And this is, from our point of view, a moderate success. It would be a full success if every member state would decide to fulfill legally binding obligation created on the basis of the European Union decisions from 2015. As we know, that wasn't the case. Resettlement. Resettlement is also taking place. So far, we managed to resettle mainly from Turkey 20,000 people. And one clarification, resettlement is not something that the European Union devised. This is also a program coordinated by the UN. It stems from the obligations made under the European Geneva Convention on Refugees. And this is also a sort of humane obligation of every civilized country, also countries of the European Union, to demonstrate solidarity when it is needed. So I'm sorry if that sounded maybe a little bit too strong, but we need to keep in mind that relocation wasn't any sort of devious plan devised by the European Commission to flood European Union with illegal migrants. That wasn't the case. And resettlement is also an important part of more general global human agenda of how people should react in a situation of crisis. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all the responses. One line to the European elections 2019. Extreme parties might be rising and might be acquiring more votes and seats. This means a change of the majority votes within the Assembly. What happened in 2015 and 16, I would say smuggling, improving their strategies, but it's obvious that the Syrian war has had an impact, an important impact. Nevertheless, migration flows just change according to systemic conditions. Now Spain is at stake. This means that global waves of migrants just move according to systemic conditions. I think that coffee is waiting for us, but probably we need some important indications from Professor Paczocka.
Once again, I would like to thank Stefania for moderating this session and three of our institutional guests for accepting this invitation. I hope that this part of questions was especially of your interest. So thank you very much for being involved in this discussion, and sometimes hard topics to be discussed, but this is what we should do as academics. Now a short announcement. So we are a bit late, but that's fine, because next session we'll start at 12, so be there on time, and there will be only 3 speakers instead of 4, because Anna Masłoń-Oracz, for private reasons, will not be with us. So we will start at 12, and we will have 1 hour till 2 till 1 p.m. with the panel number 2. And this session will be moderated by Professor Anna Wizwizy with the involvement of Dr. Jolanta Szymańska, Professor Vasile Kuczerescu, and Dr. Maciej Cesarz. So now I would like to invite you for a coffee break, and our speakers, please remember to put your presentations, if they were not sent to me in advance, here to the right folder. So thank you very much for this discussion once again, and please feel free to enjoy coffee break, and you may continue the discussions with our guests. Thank you very much.